"You can't stop this fence, Mr. Harper. The board's decision is final." Those are the exact words I imagined HOA President Karen Mitchell would yell in my face, standing right in the middle of my yard, while a few other residents smiled from the path they were about to turn into a public thoroughfare. She'd think her power was absolute, but she didn't know who she was dealing with. I'm Jack Harper, a retired mechanical engineer with 35 years of experience building agricultural machinery in Michigan, skilled enough to turn their ridiculous project into a laughingstock. How did I turn this nightmare into a retaliation that had the whole Cedar Hollow Estates buzzing? That's the story I'm about to tell you. I'm Jack Harper. After 35 years designing machinery for vast fields, from automated irrigation systems to improved harvesters, I retired with 2 industry award nominations and enough savings to buy my dream home, a small ranch in Cedar Hollow Estates, Georgia. This wasn't just any house, it was built from handcrafted pine, set on 3 pristine acres, opening up to a clear view of the low hills in the distance. The stone fireplace in the living room took a master mason 6 weeks to complete. The large windows were perfectly positioned to catch the morning sunlight, shining onto the wooden dining table I made myself. I'd spent decades in noisy workshops, building machines to turn other people's ideas into reality. Now I finally had a peaceful corner of my own. My wife, Emily Harper, who'd stood by me through countless late nights and stressful deadlines, fell in love with this house at first sight. She had rheumatoid arthritis, her trembling hands no longer up to heavy tasks, but she found joy in the raised garden beds I built for her in the backyard. "This is where I'll heal," she told me when we moved in, her eyes lighting up as she looked at the tomato and lettuce patches next to the small chicken coop she set up for her 6 reddish-brown hens. She named them after characters from novels, whispering to them each morning as she collected eggs. I'd often stand at the kitchen door, watching her through the glass, feeling my heart lighten because we finally had a place to call home. Cedar Hollow Estates seemed like the ideal community, a mix of retirees like us and a few vacation homeowners, all valuing the quiet and natural beauty here. The Homeowners Association HOA was reasonable, at first focused only on road maintenance and preserving the area's rustic charm. I'd read every word of their rules, studied every clause. There was nothing about future development rights or privacy intrusions, nothing suggesting our peaceful home could be disturbed. For the first 2 years we lived our dream. I set up a small workshop in the garage, where I fixed old lawnmowers and crafted mechanical toys. Emily tended her chickens and garden, her hands slowly adjusting to the gentle rhythm of the work. We hosted our grown kids for holidays, proudly showing off the home we'd sweated and bled to earn. We'd earned this peace after a lifetime of work, but then Karen Mitchell arrived and everything changed. Karen Mitchell came into Cedar Hollow Estates like a strange wind, and I quickly realized she wasn't the type to respect peace. She was a former property manager from Atlanta, used to working for big companies that built resorts, and it only took her a few months to climb into the HOA president's chair. I heard she'd swayed the board with sweet talk about increasing property values and leaned on connections, her husband a lawyer, her brother in the county council. At first I didn't pay much attention. I was busy fixing an old lawnmower in the garage and Emily was caught up with her chickens, but then Karen started pushing ideas about modernizing Cedar Hollow, and I felt something off. I just didn't expect that off feeling to crash right into my yard. It all started when I got back from visiting my brother in Savannah. I'd just parked my truck by the garage when I spotted survey stakes with orange flagging tape, slicing a diagonal line across my yard. No notice, no explanation, just some strangers who'd trespassed on my land while I was away. I went inside, called the HOA office right away, but Karen's assistant just stammered, "You'll need to speak with Mrs. Mitchell directly." I waited 3 days for her to call back, and when the phone finally rang, her voice came through, syrupy and fake. "This is just preliminary planning for a community improvement," she said, like she was reading from a sales brochure. "Nothing to worry about, Mr. Harper." But I was worried, especially when trucks loaded with building materials started showing up near the community park. Steel beams, Cement bags and rolls of barbed wire were unloaded daily. I asked a worker what was happening, and he said, "Putting up a fence, it'll be done before the rainy season." The real shock hit at an HOA informational meeting, held on a Tuesday morning, when most residents were busy. I had to cancel a doctor's appointment to go, and when I walked into the meeting room, I saw just 8 people out of the 70 households in Cedar Hollow. Karen stood there, all smiles, unveiling architectural drawings of the area's exciting new amenity, a steel fence cutting through the community's center, linking her property to the nearby park. And right in its path was my house, with the fence running straight through my yard, splitting the land Emily and I had worked so hard to make our own. "This will boost accessibility and property values," Karen declared, her tone like she was selling real estate. The board unanimously approved it. I raised my hand to object, trying to stay calm. "It cuts through my home," I said. "I never got any notice." "There's nothing in the HOA rules about this." Karen gave a tight smile, sliding a paper across the table. "Section 37, Paragraph C grants land use rights for community benefits. Notices were sent long ago. Maybe you should check your mail more often." I knew there'd been no letter. I also knew that Paragraph C had been slipped into last year's administrative update, which residents were told was just clarifying existing language. As I left the meeting, Walter Brooks, a retired judge who lived next door, pulled me aside. "This isn't right," he whispered. "She's running this place like her personal fiefdom. But be careful. Her husband's firm is handling the construction, and her brother's on the county council." I nodded, anger rising inside me. The fence wasn't just a structure, it was a declaration of war. My yard, where Emily tended her chickens, where I savored my peace, was now threatened by Karen Mitchell's ambition. I didn't know what to do yet, but I swore I wouldn't let her steal what was ours so easily. I'm not the type to give up easily, so the morning after that meeting, I called Thomas Reed, a land rights lawyer in Atlanta I'd met through an old friend from Michigan. Thomas was the kind who spoke little and did a lot, and when I told him about Karen Mitchell's fence cutting through my yard, he agreed to look at my documents right away. I sent him the HOA rules, my home contract, and the paper Karen had flaunted with Section 37, Paragraph C. After a few hours of study, Thomas called back, his voice low but tinged with concern. "They've exploited a legal gray area," he said. "This community improvement clause is vague enough for them to twist however they want." Georgia courts tend to side with HOAs in development disputes, especially when they argue it benefits most residents. I gripped the phone tight, a wave of helplessness hitting me, but I told him to go ahead. We filed for an emergency injunction to halt construction until a full impact assessment could be done. While we waited, I stood on my porch watching Karen's crew swarm in like locusts. They brought excavators, rolls of barbed wire, and 6-foot steel beams, starting to dig holes and set posts right through my yard. The noise was relentless, drills whining, hammers banging, workers shouting, tearing apart the piece Emily and I had built. Emily's chicken coop got smashed to pieces on the first day, the hens running wild in panic until she corralled them into a garage corner. I tried to help, but Emily's trembling hands couldn't hold the birds, and I saw her eyes well up as she stared at the splintered wood that used to be her joy. "They've got no right to do this," she whispered, her voice breaking. I hugged her, promising I'd find a way, but deep down I knew things were spiraling out of control. Our injunction went to court just 2 days later, but my hope evaporated fast. The judge, a middle-aged man with a cold stare, turned out to be a golf buddy of Karen's brother, something I only learned later from Walter Brooks. He denied the request in under 48 hours, ruling that since the fence didn't directly touch my house, just cut through the yard, no irreparable harm was proven. Thomas shook his head as we left the courthouse. "They've got people in the system," he said. "We could appeal, but it'll take time and money." I clenched my jaw, knowing I couldn't burn through our savings on a fight Karen had rigged to win. Construction sped up right after. They poured concrete for support posts overnight, raised long steel panels, and even chopped down the wild bushes at my yard's edge that Emily and I loved for blocking the road's view. By the next morning, the fence was done, a gray steel line slicing my yard in two, turning it into a public path for Cedar Hollow residents. I stood there, watching neighbors start to walk through, some waving like it was normal. Emily couldn't take it. She went inside, shut the door tight, and I found her in the kitchen, hands over her face. "I can't go out there anymore," she said, voice shaking. "They're everywhere, Jack." Her arthritis worsened from the stress, and I felt like I'd failed to protect the home we'd once called our healing place. I filed complaints with the county building office, citing after-hours work and environmental damage from the tree cutting. But every time an inspector scheduled a visit, they canceled at the last minute. A young inspector, seemingly honest, pulled me aside after his boss overruled him. "I can't help you officially," he said, glancing around like he was scared of being overheard. "But check the permits, there's a mismatch between what's approved and what they're building." I dug into the paperwork, and he was right. The permit said the fence had to be at least 50 feet from homes, but this one was just 20 feet from mine, close enough I could hear footsteps from the living room. I took this evidence back to court, only to get the same judge who'd denied us before. He called the discrepancies minor modifications within the project's scope, and that was that. Every door slammed shut. The county council wouldn't hear appeals because of Karen's brother's conflict of interest, but they made sure it went to someone in her pocket. The state regulatory agency cared only about specs, not privacy. Local papers ignored my calls. Their owner had just joined the golf club where Karen's husband was a member. My savings dwindled from legal fees with nothing to show for it. Emily's health got worse every day, and I knew I had to change my approach. The system might be rigged, but I had my skills, and I'd use them to take back what was ours. I didn't waste time after that final court loss. The legal system was locked up tight by Karen Mitchell's connections, and I knew hammering at closed doors would only cost more money and make Emily suffer longer. But standing in my garage, staring at the tools and machines I'd collected over 35 years as a mechanical engineer, I realized something: I didn't need the law to fight back. I had two hands, a head full of ideas, and experience building everything from irrigation systems to harvesters. Karen might have the county council and her lawyers, but I had my own way, and I'd make her pay for turning my yard into a public highway. The idea hit me on an unusually warm morning, while I was splitting firewood in the yard to let off steam. The screech of Karen's shiny SUV echoed from a distance. She parked at the edge of my driveway, stepping out in an expensive business dress, clearly meant to contrast with my dusty flannel shirt and jeans. Behind her, a young couple, the Carters from down the road, walked through the newly built fence, chatting happily like they had every right to cross my yard. "Mr. Harper," Karen called, striding toward me with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. "I thought we should discuss some final details before this path officially opens next week." I set the axe down, crossed my arms. "There's nothing to discuss. This fence shouldn't be here." She waved a hand like swatting a fly. "It's already here, and it's going to change Cedar Hollow. You just haven't seen the benefits yet." "You turned my yard into a public road," I shot back. "People walk through here like I don't exist. They look right into my house." She cut me off, her tone smooth as a salesman's. "Progress always has minor inconveniences, but the board approved an attractive compensation package." She held out a beige envelope: landscaping vouchers, free park passes, and an HOA fee cut she called generous. I didn't touch it. "I don't want compensation. I want my privacy and peace back." Her smile vanished. "That's no longer an option. The decision's final. The path opens Saturday." Above us, the Carters crossed the fence again, now looking down awkwardly as they heard us argue. "You can't just trample people's lives," I said, my voice rising despite trying to stay calm. "There have to be procedures, impact studies." She interrupted again. "Everything's been completed and approved. Maybe if you attended meetings instead of hiding in your garage, you'd understand how communities grow." That's when I snapped. 35 years of restraint in chaotic workshops, facing impossible deadlines without complaint, melted away in an instant. "This isn't growth," I yelled, pointing at the fence. "This is invasion. That's my home you're violating, not some line in your plan." Her face hardened. I get that change is tough for folks your age, but Cedar Hollow's moving forward. Those who can't adapt should ask if this place still suits them. The threat was crystal clear: get in line or get out. This conversation's over, she said, turning to leave. The path opens Saturday. I suggest you use the compensation to buy better curtains. I called after her as she walked away. It's not over, Karen. Not by a long shot. She paused, glancing back with a mix of pity and contempt. It was over when the board voted. You're just the last one to accept it. Watching her drive off, the carters still crossing my yard, I knew conventional methods had failed. It was time to use the skills I'd honed my whole life. I wouldn't wreck her fence, that'd be illegal and risky. Instead, I'd make them afraid to cross it with a toll gate, and I started planning in my garage that night. After Karen Mitchell left with her smug grin, I marched straight into the garage, shut the door, and let my mind run full throttle. I wasn't about to tear down her fence, that'd land me in legal trouble she'd surely use to crush me. Instead, I'd make that public path she bragged about something no one wanted to use. The toll gate idea sparked when she dared me to buy curtains to hide the privacy she'd stolen. With 35 years of know-how building farm machinery, I could craft something legal, effective, and sarcastic enough to drive Karen nuts. I'd set a steel gate right in the path across my yard, my land, my rules, and make anyone who crossed pay for it. If they wanted my home as their highway, they'd pay the price, literally. It took me 3 sleepless nights to nail down the details. First, I measured the fence cutting through my yard, 15 feet wide, perfect for a sturdy double gate. I didn't want anything flimsy or easy to break. It had to be tough, smart, and stamped with my touch. In the garage, I had all the tools from my Michigan days: a welder, motion sensors from an old project, and a pile of scrap steel from a harvester repair years back. But I needed a hand, and that's where Lucas Hayes came in. Lucas, a 24-year-old kid, a few houses down, was a gearhead who'd hang around my garage watching me work. When I pitched the idea, his eyes lit up. "She'll lose it," he laughed. I'm in. With his help, the plan took shape. The gate had to be a full-on automated system. 2 5-foot steel wings, about 200 pounds, mounted on tamper-proof hinges. I designed a small toll station, a theft-proof steel box for coins or card swipes, wired to sensors that'd open the gate at a $1 payment. For a jab, I added a speaker programmed to blare, "Thanks for paying to cross Jack Harper's yard," whenever it opened. Lucas suggested a surveillance camera from his old security kit to catch people's reactions, and any sabotage from Karen's side. I wanted it all legal, tied to George's private property rights, so I double-checked the law. As long as the gate stayed on my land, and didn't block the main public road, no one could touch it. We got to work the next day. Lucas and I hauled scrap steel into the yard, cut it into bars with a metal saw, and welded them into 2 gate wings in the garage. The clash of metal and smell of burning steel took me back to Michigan, only this time, I was building for myself. Lucas hooked up the motion sensors, programming them to spot passersby and trigger the toll box. The coin box was the trickiest. We reinforced it with thick steel to stop thieves, with a slot just big enough for a $1 coin. I tested it by tossing in a few coins, and when the speaker chirped, "Thanks for paying to cross Jack Harper's yard," in a cheery robot voice, Lucas laughed so hard he sat on the floor. But it wasn't all smooth. On day 2, rain hit and the sensors got wet, jamming the gate after a few tries. I cursed myself for forgetting George's weather, but Lucas grabbed a plastic sheet from the garage for a quick cover. I upgraded it with waterproof coating on the circuits, and by the 3rd test, the gate worked flawlessly, opening with payment, locking without. Emily poked her head in, worried I'd land in legal hot water. "They'll sue you," she said, clutching an egg basket from the chickens, now cooped up in a corner. But when I explained it was our land and the law backed me, she nodded slowly. "Just be careful, Jack," she said, heading back inside. The night before Karen's path opened, Lucas and I set up the gate. We worked by flashlight, digging deep holes for concrete posts, then mounting the gate across the fence in my yard. I welded extra braces so no one could lift it without a cutting torch. By dawn, it was done. I stepped back, eyeing the steel beast in my yard, not pretty, but mine, and ready to do its job. Lucas slapped my shoulder. "Tomorrow's gonna be fun," he said, grinning mischievously. For a final test, I crossed the fence from the other side like a stranger, tossing a $1 coin into the box. The sensor beeped, the speaker sang, "Thanks for paying to cross Jack Harper's yard," and the gates swung open with a soft metal whine. I walked through, feeling like I'd just won a big hand. I knew Karen wouldn't let it slide easy, but I was ready. She wanted a public path, fine, but they'd pay to use it, and I'd make them think twice every time they crossed my yard. The gate was set, and the real fight was about to kick off. The morning after Lucas and I installed the toll gate, I stood on my porch with a coffee mug, waiting for the inevitable. Karen Mitchell's fence had officially opened that Saturday, and Cedar Hollow Estates residents started trickling in to try the new path she'd hyped as a community perk. I watched the Carter family, the young couple Karen brought by before, approach first, chatting happily, until they stopped short at the double steel gate blocking my yard. They stared at the toll box with $1 to pass welded on it, then at each other, plainly confused. Mr. Carter shrugged, dug out a coin, and tossed it in the slot. "Thanks for paying to cross Jack Harper's yard," the speaker blared in a chipper electronic voice, and the gates swung open slow. They walked through, but the smiles were gone, replaced by irritation. I sipped my coffee, grinning. Game on. Not everyone was willing to pay. Another group of three, I recognized them as the Evans family from the end of the street, came right after. They looked at the gate, at each other, then turned around and walked back, muttering something about nonsense. By noon, I counted 10 people who tried the path, 4 paid the fee, 6 gave up and left. The foot traffic dropped sharply, compared to the day before, when the fence was still a free walkway. I caught snippets of complaints from a distance. "Who charges money just to cross a yard?" And Karen said this was a public road, but I didn't care. Every coin clinking into the box was a small jab at Karen's plan, and I liked that feeling. Karen's reaction came faster than I expected. Less than 2 hours after the gate started working, I heard tires screeching on the road. Her shiny SUV pulled up right at the edge of my yard, and Karen stepped out, face flushed, her high heels clacking on the concrete path. "Mr. Harper," she yelled, storming toward me, pointing at the gate like it was a crime. "What is this? What do you think you're doing?" I set my coffee mug down, stepped onto the porch, and kept my voice calm. "This is a toll gate, my land, my rules. Want to cross, pay up." She froze for a second, then roared, "This is vandalism of community property. You have no right to block this path." "You're wrong," I replied, crossing my arms. "Your fence is on my land, and Georgia law protects private property rights. I'm not blocking the main community path, I'm just charging for anyone who wants to cross my yard." Karen clenched her fists, clearly not expecting me to have researched this so well. "I'll sue you," she threatened, her voice trembling with rage. "Go ahead," I said, shrugging. "But you'll need to prove I'm breaking the law, and I'm not." She glared at the gate, then back at me, her eyes sharp as knives. "You think this childish stunt will change anything? The fence is here to stay." I gave a slight smile. "Then you'll have to explain to everyone why they're paying to use your perk." Karen spun on her heel, but not before throwing back. "You'll regret this, Harper." I watched her drive off, feeling like I'd just cleared the first round of a long fight. Emily came out from the house, clutching an egg basket, her eyes worried. "Can she do something to you?" she asked. I pulled her close, pointing at the gate. "She's got no legal ground, Em, and if she tries, Lucas's camera will catch it all." Emily nodded, then whispered, "Put up a sign, call it Toll Booth Lane." I laughed. "Good idea." The community's reaction started spreading by day's end. Clara Evans, an old lady nearby I rarely spoke to, knocked on my door that afternoon. "I hate that fence," she said, hands on hips. "But your gate had me laughing so hard it hurt." Karen told me to come complain, but I told her straight I'm on your side. I invited her in for tea, and she said a few others were getting fed up with the path, not because of my gate, but because they realized Karen had sold them a lie about community benefits. "I heard the Carters called her this morning," Clara added, winking. "They don't like paying either." By evening Lucas swung by with a huge grin. "You've got to see this," he said, handing me his phone. He'd filmed clips from the camera, the carters paying with sour faces, a middle-aged guy tossing a coin and mumbling curses, and a bunch of kids giggling at the gate. "I'll post it online if you say yes," Lucas said. I nodded. "Do it. Let's see how Karen enjoys the world knowing about this." I tweaked the gate before bed, turning up the speaker so "Thanks for paying to cross Jack Harper's yard" rang out louder. If Karen wanted war, I'd give her one worth remembering, and this was just the start. After that first day the toll gate ran, I knew Karen Mitchell wouldn't sit still while I turned her community perk into a punchline. She hit back faster than I'd guessed. The next morning, a team of engineers in reflective vests showed up at my yard, hauling measuring gear and notebooks, obviously hired to prove my gate was illegal. I stood on the porch, coffee in hand, watching them measure every inch around the fence and gate. One of them, who looked like the leader, shook his head after 20 minutes. "It's fully on private land," I overheard him tell a coworker. "No violations here," I smirked. Karen might have money and connections, but she couldn't redraw the legal lines of my property. She didn't stop there though. By noon, a uniformed security crew rolled in, setting up a small post right at my yard's edge, next to the fence. They mounted a camera on a nearby pole, aimed straight at the gate, clearly to watch for anything suspicious I might do. One guard, stone-faced, walked up to my porch. "We're here to ensure no vandalism," he said, voice flat. "Vandalism of what?" I shot back, pointing at the gate. "This is my property, and it's working fine." He didn't answer, just returned to his post. I knew this was Karen's game. She wanted to scare me into taking the gate down, but I wasn't that easily shaken. The community's reaction only fueled her fury. Lucas had posted the camera footage to TikTok the night before, and by morning, it had gone viral with over 200,000 views. The short clip, the carters grimacing as they paid, a man swearing under his breath as he tossed a coin, and kids giggling at the speaker, was titled "Tollbooth Lane, Cedar Hollow's Pricest Road." Comments flooded in, "This guy's a legend," and HOA met its match. I'm not big on social media, but Lucas told me the video was making Karen a laughingstock online. Foot traffic on the path plummeted, from 10 people the first day to just 3 the next. Everyone hated paying, and the mocking "thanks for paying to cross Jack Harper's yard" made them sheepish when neighbors saw. Karen tried another tack to save face. That afternoon, she staged a community walk, leading a group of 5 all-HOA board loyalists through the fence, to prove my gate didn't matter. I watched from the porch as they lined up, Karen at the front, clutching a coin with a face like she wanted to strangle me. She threw it in the box, the speaker sounded off, and the gate opened. But 2 behind her, an old man and a middle-aged woman, fumbled in their pockets, no change on them. They stood there red-faced, while Karen snapped, "Pay it, hurry up." They got through eventually, but I heard them grumbling as they walked off. "This is too much hassle." Karen glanced back at me, eyes blazing, but I just shrugged like it was nothing. The HOA kept inspecting, but it was all for naught. Another engineering team came the next day with distance meters and the fence's building permit. They checked if the gate encroached on public space, but my property line was clear as day. The gate sat 10 feet from the main road, fully on my land. Lucas stood by me, chuckling as they left empty-handed. "She's panicking now," he said. Karen even sent a lawyer to my door, with a sheet listing HOA rule violations. I skimmed it, laughed. "This is my land, not communal. Call the cops if you want, they'll back me up." The lawyer muttered something and slunk off. The effects started rippling out. Clara Evans stopped by that night with a plate of cookies. "I heard folks from other blocks say they're done crossing," she said. "They say it's a pain, better to go around than pay." She winked. "That speaker of yours is doing the trick." I thanked her, then tweaked the gate before bed, upping the fee to $2 on weekends, adding a new message, "Weekend Special. Thanks for supporting Karen Mitchell." I wanted to see how long she'd hold out as the whole community turned away. The financial strain showed too. Walter Brooks, the retired judge, who'd warned me about Karen, texted that the HOA board was in an emergency meeting over skyrocketing fence maintenance costs. Cameras, guards, engineers, all eating cash, and a path no one used, brought in nothing. "She's trying to hush people up," Walter wrote, but they're asking why the fund's draining into this. I grinned, knowing my gate wasn't just ticking Karen off, it was hitting her wallet. Lucas and I sat in the garage, re-watching the TikTok video, now past 300,000 views. "What's she gonna do next?" he asked. "Let her try," I said. "I've got more tricks up my sleeve if she won't back down." My toll gate didn't just drive Karen Mitchell nuts, it started digging a deep hole in the HOA's pockets. After a few days running, I noticed foot traffic through my yard drop to almost zero. Where there'd been a few scattered payers, now it was just the wind whistling through the empty steel fence. But the costs Karen was shelling out to fight me didn't let up. Walter Brooks texted me the next morning, updating me from an HOA emergency meeting he'd eavesdropped on. "They've spent over $10,000 this week alone," he wrote. "Guards, engineers, lawyers, all to deal with your gate. She's trying to save face, but people are asking questions." I smirked, sipping my coffee. If Karen wanted to play the money game, I was happy to let her burn through her own wallet. The financial fallout spread fast. The fence was pitched as a property value booster, but no one wanted to use a path they had to pay for every time. The HOA had hoped to sell day passes to outsiders for extra cash, but that plan went up in smoke when Lucas's TikTok video hit 500,000 views. Toll Booth Lane was now the path's official nickname online, paired with the hashtag #KarenFail that Lucas showed me on his phone. One top comment cracked me up: "Who needs a park when you've got to pay to cross this old guy's yard?" Clara Evans dropped by that day with fresh news. "I heard the HOA's insurance company just doubled their rates," she said, eyes gleaming. "They're calling the fence a high risk from all the complaints." "Karen's blaming you." I shrugged. "She brought it on herself." The community started doubting Karen. Walter called me that night, his voice low but excited. "I got a look at the HOA's financials," he said. "They've sunk $25,000 into the fence since it started, nearly double the original budget. That's not counting this week's guards and engineers." No one was told about the overrun. He paused, then added, "She hid the numbers, but I've got copies." Folks are about to revolt. I could feel the shift in Cedar Hollow Estates air. People who'd once ignored it were now whispering by the fence, not about my gate, but about whose pockets their dues were lining. Karen wouldn't give up easy. She held a community meet and greet right outside my yard the next morning, bringing the full HOA board and a few loyal residents to prove the path was still safe and convenient. I stood in the garage, peering through the window, watching her lead 6 people across the fence. They stopped at the gate, and Karen, face beet red, tossed a $2 coin in the box. I'd upped the weekend fee as promised. "Thanks for supporting Karen Mitchell," the speaker boomed, louder than ever from my last tweak. The group went quiet, then a woman, wife of a board member, burst into tears. "I heard metal clanging like it's about to collapse," she shrieked, pointing at the gate. I nearly laughed. It was just the hinges squeaking faintly, but she was genuinely freaked. Karen tried to calm them, yelling, "It's perfectly fine, don't listen to Harper." But the group broke up right after, no one willing to cross again. I decided to turn up the heat. That night, I sat with Lucas in the garage, tweaking the gate so it didn't always charge. Sometimes it opened free, sometimes it demanded $2. Totally random thanks to a simple circuit Lucas wired in. "Keeps them guessing," I said. "They'll think it's broken, then get hit when they owe cash." Lucas nodded, laughing hard. "She'll flip when more complaints roll in." I added a new speaker message, set to play randomly. "The HOA wishes you a great day, pay to proceed." The idea was to tie Karen to it in their minds, even though she had nothing to do with the gate. The community's doubts exploded at an unscheduled HOA meeting that weekend. Clara recounted it to me later, eyes shining. "The room was packed," she said. "People demanded Karen explain why the reserve fund's tanking. A vacation rental guy stood up, said he lost clients over the path's bad rep, revenues down 40%. Walter spoke too, his voice booming like back in his judge days. "We've blown over $30,000 on this fence in under 2 months, he declared. "No transparency, no votes. I move we suspend the path until an independent audit's done." Karen slammed the table, yelling that the motion was absurd, but the crowd's murmurs of agreement showed she was losing grip. I stood on my porch that night, staring at the now deserted fence, just crickets chirping in the dark. Emily stepped out, her face free of worry for the first time in days. "They're turning on her," she said. Hand on my shoulder. "I see that," I replied, pulling her close. "But I'm not done yet. She wants a fight, I'll give her one to the end." My gait wasn't just a machine, it was a weapon, and I knew it was pushing Karen to the brink. She could scream all she wanted, but money and trust from the community couldn't be bought back with words. My toll gate did more than I'd hoped. It didn't just humiliate Karen Mitchell, it sparked a rebellion in Cedar Hollow Estates. After that chaotic HOA meeting, where Walter Brooks and others grilled her on the fence costs, the community took action. Walter called me the next morning, his voice firm with resolve. "I found some stuff," he said. "This fence doesn't have full county permits, just preliminary approval pushed through by Karen's brother, and the environmental impact report. A rushed mess of paper." He paused, then added, "The board broke our own rules by not voting on costs over $20,000. I grinned over the phone, "So we've got her." Walter wasn't alone. He invited me, Clara Evans, and a few other residents to his place that night to strategize. In his cramped living room, with Clara's cookie plate on the table, we pored over the documents he'd gathered. He pointed out that the building permit required the fence to be at least 50 feet from homes, but it was just 20 feet from mine, hard proof from that young county inspector's check. "She used connections to skirt the law," Walter said, tapping the table. "But we can use the law to take her down." We agreed to file an official complaint with Georgia's building authority and demand an independent financial audit of the HOA. Clara laughed loud. "I can't wait to see her face when she hears this." Our complaint went out the next day, and pressure piled on Karen from all sides. Georgia's regulators launched an investigation, sending inspectors to examine the fence. They measured, snapped photos, and confirmed the distance violation, a direct hit to Karen's permit. At the same time, the audit got greenlit after over 40 residents signed a petition, thanks to Clara's door-to-door push. The audit results came a week later, and they were a bombshell in the community. Karen had hidden the fence's true cost, not $25,000 like she'd claimed, but over $60,000, with no bid contracts handed to her husband's company. The HOA's reserve fund was gutted to cover it, without a single vote approving a dime. The next HOA meeting was a full-on battle. The room was packed with over 60 residents, the most ever. Karen stood up front, trying to stay composed, but her hands shook holding the mic. Walter rose first, waving the audit high. "This fence has swallowed over $60,000, he boomed, voice echoing like his courtroom days. "No revenue, no benefits, just maintenance and legal costs from Harper's Gate. We've been duped by a lack of transparency." The crowd buzzed, then a man, the vacation rental owner Clara mentioned, stood up. "I've lost half my tenants over this path's bad name," he shouted. "Who's paying me back?" Karen slammed the table, trying to drown out the noise. "It's all for the community's good. Harper's the problem," but she couldn't hold it together anymore. Clara stood, her voice cutting. "You've dragged us into debt for a path no one uses. I move we vote you off the board." Applause erupted, and though Karen screamed the motion was invalid, another voice chimed in, "I call for a vote right now." The room turned chaotic, but the ballots got counted. By a landslide 48 to 60, Karen was ousted as president. Walter was elected interim chair, tasked with cleaning up her mess. "Step 1, he declared as the meeting wrapped, is tearing down this fence. The county issued an official order a few days later. The fence was declared illegal for violating building codes, and the HOA had to dismantle it within 2 weeks. Karen had no options left. She tried to sell her house that same week, but her reputation in Cedar Hollow was ruined. No one wanted to buy the home of Karen Fail from TikTok. In the end she left, abandoning the empty house with a "for sale urgent" sign out front. Walter came to see me after she was gone, sitting on my porch with a glass of tea. "We know what you did," he said, cutting to the chase. "No one can prove it, but we know." I didn't confirm or deny, just shrugged. "The new board's looking at solutions," he went on. "Taking down the fence is a given, but we could build a new path, farther from homes. If your gate stopped running, we might use it more sensibly." I got his hint. 2 days later, the board announced plans to remove the fence and construct a new path, curving through vacant land 200 feet from my house. I took down the toll gate right after, stashing it in the garage like a trophy. I used the $500 I'd earned from the fees to fix Emily's chicken coop, and she laughed for the first time in weeks as the hens roamed the yard again. "We've got our home back," she said, holding an egg basket. The new path was finished a few months later, no longer cutting through anyone's yard, but winding around the community as a little road residents actually used. Walter stepped up to amend the HOA rules, mandating a majority vote for any big project affecting homes, a legacy of this fight. Karen and her cronies sold their houses and left, replaced by new residents who valued the transparency we'd fought for. I stood in the garage, eyeing the dust-covered steel gate, feeling relieved. It wasn't just a machine, it was how I protected the home Emily and I had sweated to build. Cedar Hollow Estates was peaceful again, and I knew I'd helped make it happen. When Karen Mitchell's fence finally came down, I stood on my porch watching workers pull each steel beam from my yard, feeling like a huge weight had lifted. Cedar Hollow Estates went back to being quiet, free of strangers' footsteps or Karen's shouts echoing over the fence. Emily stepped outside in her old apron, carrying a bucket of chicken feed, her face clear of worry for the first time in months. I'd rebuilt the coop with the $500 from the toll gate, and now her reddish-brown hens strutted around the yard again, clucking each morning like nothing had happened. "We've got our home back, Jack," she said, smiling as she picked up the first egg from the free-roaming flock. I pulled her close, nodding. "Yeah, we did it." The new path the HOA built under Walter Brooks's leadership was a game-changer. It didn't slice through anyone's yard anymore, instead curving through vacant land 200 feet from my house, winding past old oaks into a cute little road residents genuinely enjoyed. I'd often see kids biking there, old folks walking dogs, and no one had to pay a dime to cross my yard. Walter kept his word, turning the path into something that served the community without stepping on anyone. He stopped by my place once it was done, sitting on the porch with a tea glass. "We turned a wrong into a right," he said, winking. "But I know you started it all." I just smiled, saying nothing, letting him take it however he wanted. Life for me and Emily settled back into its old rhythm. The yard wasn't a battlefield anymore, but a place for her to tend her chickens and raised garden beds. The tomato and lettuce patches grew lush, like they felt the peace return too. I went back to the garage, fixing old lawnmowers and teaching Lucas Hayes a few tricks I'd picked up in Michigan. Lucas became a regular. He'd bring goofy ideas like a solar-powered bike, and I liked how he reminded me of myself at that age. The garage turned into a hangout, not just for Lucas but for a few neighborhood kids curious about what the gate guy was up to next. Cedar Hollow Estates changed completely after Karen left. She and her crew sold their homes, replaced by new folks who appreciated the transparency we'd battled for. Walter, with his judge's know-how, revised the HOA rules, adding a clause requiring a majority vote for any major project impacting homes. "No one's getting forced anymore," he said at a community meeting, and people clapped in agreement. I didn't go to many meetings, I'd rather stay home with Emily, but Clara Evans told me folks now talked about Toll Booth Lane, like a local legend. Some even exaggerated that my gate once charged $10 a pass or locked itself if you didn't pay. I never corrected them, let them spin the tale their way. One evening, the community threw an outdoor party near the new path, with lanterns strung in the trees and tables piled with food. Walter stood up in the crowd, raising a wine glass. "Here's to our resilience," he said, voice carrying, "and to those who stand up for what's right." His eyes met mine across the crowd, a subtle nod no one else caught. I raised my glass back, feeling at ease. We hadn't just reclaimed our yard, we'd taken back the whole community from people like Karen. Sometimes I'd stand in the yard, watching the new path from afar with folks passing happily, and think about what went down. It wasn't just about guarding privacy or land, it was refusing to let someone sacrifice us for their ambition. 35 years as a mechanical engineer taught me how to build machines, but this fight taught me how to use them to protect what matters. The toll gate sat in the garage now, under a thin layer of dust and a tarp, but I didn't ditch it. I kept it as a reminder, not just for me, but for anyone thinking they could stomp through our lives without a cost. One morning, sitting on the porch with Emily, watching the chickens peck the ground and sunlight filter through the oaks, I recalled my dad's words, "Trust is good, but preparation's better." I'd trusted Cedar Hollow would stay peaceful when we moved in, but it was preparation, skills, grit, and that gate that brought it back. I sipped my coffee, content. Karen might have lost, but I didn't just win, I reclaimed the home Emily and I deserved. The story reflects plenty of real-life issues in the U.S. today, especially around personal property rights, overreach by homeowners associations (HOAs), and the power of community unity against unfairness. In modern America, HOAs often stir controversy by forcing rules on residents, like when Karen built a fence through Jack's yard without consent, a scenario not uncommon in suburban spots like Cedar Hollow Estates, Georgia. Jack, a retired mechanical engineer, used his tollgate, a creative legal fix, to take back control of his property, mirroring the self-reliance and ingenuity baked into American values. Lucas's viral TikTok video amplified the tale and pressured Karen, showing how social media shapes opinions now, a common trend in the US where people wield tech to push for justice. The lesson here isn't just about sticking it out through tough times, it's about leveraging your strengths and community to defend what's rightfully yours. Jack didn't just lean on the law, which Karen's connections had twisted, but tapped his building skills, rigging the gate with a mocking, "Thanks for paying to cross Jack Harper's yard," to turn inconvenience into a counterstrike. Support from Walter, Clara, and eventually the whole community in toppling Karen proves that in America, where individualism shines, collective strength can still spark big change. Real-life advice when facing unfairness, like an HOA crossing the line: know your rights, like Jack citing Georgia law, get creative with push back the toll gate, and build alliances with Walter and Clara to fight smart. Plus, stay ready like Jack, keeping the gate in his garage, because as his dad said, trust is good, but preparation's better, a practical American mindset that keeps you set for whatever curveballs life throws. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss creative fight-back stories like Jack Harper's. Thanks for watching this journey to save his yard. Catch you in the next video, where we'll dig into more ways to turn challenges into wins.